The prison areas were filled with darkness and despair, with deformed stalkers roaming through its halls. Barely escaping the grasp of those horrors, Daniel now finds himself in a new hub location, namely the Cistern area. This huge and open section allows for fresh air and natural light, proving that outside this nightmare of a castle still exists a normal world. And much like the light and air, the ambience pours in, brightening up the atmosphere with a mysterious yet partially soothing soundtrack. Fresh air and natural light may freshen up a deprived mind, yet it is not yet for Daniel to fully enjoy. There is work to be done, and there is not much time left. Almost immediately upon setting foot into this new area, Daniel recalls a fragment of past.
So you used the drain sewers as a means of transport?
Yes, they were built to divert water from an underground spring and are quite spacious. It seemed only natural to incorporate it into the overall structure.
But we won't be using it.
Not today. The flow is seasonal, and when the spring runs dry, the damp tunnels produce a rather poisonous type of fungi. There is an antidote, of course, but we won't be bothering with it today. Come, this way instead. We're almost there.
How the area is built fascinates Daniel, and Alexander briefly elaborates how it incorporates into the overall layout, before eagerly bringing Daniel along to their current destination, which is likely the inner sanctum. The Baron says, "Come this way instead, we are almost there," hinting to the fact that they left through a large set of doors atop the small set of stairs. The main path towards the inner sanctum has been sealed shut, and Daniel has to have a look around in hope of locating yet another detour. The sets of stairs, each leading up to the upper platforms, are both left in ruins due to quakes and debris crashing down onto them. The ground floor has an obvious detour route, but it turns out to be flooded, and the water eventually becomes too deep to traverse. The water in this area may be redirected and drained, but do beware. Thanks to the recent flashback, we now know that there may be a poisonous environment ahead. This does not seem to be the case right now, as all the water seems to keep away the poisonous air produced by hazardous vegetation. Needless to say, Daniel needs a plan. There's still a way for an easy ascent. A lever allows for the release of a ladder, granting access to the upper platform, but it is stuck in place. Greasing the mechanism should solve the issue, and conveniently, there is some greasy oil leaking nearby. The glass jar from moments ago is still in good shape, and may be reused for this purpose. With the stairs intact, this emergency ladder was likely never used. Not only has the lever rusted shut, there is an obvious design flaw, and the implementation was likely never properly tested. With a couple few momentum-full impacts, the design flaw is corrected. With the stairs gone, this upper platform is the only way to reach the two side chambers, although they seem to be currently inaccessible due to both bridges being in their hoisted positions. Outside the machinery chamber ahead are two rods that control the accessibility of these two areas. The machinery system responsible for the bridge to the right side is currently inoperable and needs to be calibrated in the machinery chamber before it can work. The left side bridge is in working order, granting us access to the actual cistern. By definition, this area serves as a reservoir or container for water. Many players may feel an incoming panic upon this realization, as surely they remember the last time they had to venture into pools of water. At the same time, this spacious area at this given time carries an indistinct feel. The ambience is quiet and neutral, with a touch of nature, like simple water drops here and there. A bridge connects to the other side, but you won't get too far without getting a little wet. This is a relatively dark place, as the few lit torches struggle to illuminate the huge and open space. Rose petals are floating around in the water, suggesting that a faint memory is about to surface.
You're conserving water from the spring.
Yes, it enables me to control the water in the drain sewers to some extent. Also, it can be used for all sorts of purposes.
Like for drinking.
Well, that too. But mostly to run different machines.
Ah, like water mills.
Exactly.
Alexander is yet again vague and mysterious. After the first reasoning, he further advertises that preservation of water can be used for all sorts of purposes, hinting to something more sinister. It is my belief that water might have been used as a means of torture, and in not too long it will become apparent why. Various structure is falling apart or already lies in the water, and there is no telling how much longer it will withstand. Near the center, you will find a container, or possibly the main cistern unit. A light shines through from the ceiling, and under it, a pipe endpoint for redirecting water. If Daniel interacts with it, he will take note that it seems empty, but also that he hears a murmur. This is a word I am not familiar with, but according to a dictionary, it can mean both ambient sound and unclear voices. What are your thoughts on this? There are 3 valves in the cistern, and all 3 of them have to be turned in order to drain away all the sewer water from the staircase outside. Due to the nature of the system, there is no particular order that needs following. A loud splash in the water, but no need for panic. A loose rock just fell from the ceiling, reiterating the state of the cistern. 1 of 3 valves have been found, along with one of Daniel's curious diary entries. It's time to find out what happens next in his forgotten past.
7th of August, 1839. There is no denying that Alexander puts a lot of faith into what I can only describe as magic. I'm not surprised. Even while traveling across Europe, I assumed I would have to embrace the supernatural to save my mind and life. As a novice, I do everything in my power to stay focused and not dwell too much on my own doubts. Alexander woke me up early and told me it was time we got started on our work. He was obviously excited to get going, and we headed downstairs to the old dungeon, where he preferred to attempt his rituals. It turns out that Alexander is a true Renaissance man, paralleled only by Da Vinci, I'm sure. He showed me several rooms fitted for specific research, such as anatomy studies, alchemy, and botany. The crown of Brennenburg must be the inner sanctum, a most hallowed ground where we shall attempt to permanently banish the orb's shadow.
Daniel knew that he had to rearrange his mind should he have a chance at surviving, accepting what he believes to be his final resort. Alexander slowly introduces Daniel into different aspects of the castle, hoping to ease him into the various jobs, which will eventually grow to become quite grotesque. Up until now, I believed it was all just a mind trick, but I've started to believe that Alexander truly wished to save Daniel, only to later find out it was too late for him. This makes matters even more confusing, and it could make it harder to label the Baron as the main antagonist and solely an evil character. But more on this later. Spinning the first of 3 valves initiates the dreading process. Loud pipes in the air are in operation. The mechanism even gives birth to a sudden gust of wind, which in turn kills nearby light sources. The action feels violent, and the brief musical score feels slightly off, as if you just participated in something dubious, much like Daniel in this diary entry. The place has a creepier vibe, and an ambient track has joined in to set the new mood. Listen closely. There is now a muffled voice coming from the container, sounding like a tired and helpless man. I believe that someone has been placed either in the container or somewhere else in the Cistern system. After all, there are many creative ways of torture being implemented at Brennenburg Castle. Perhaps the prisoner was forgotten there and now suddenly woke up due to all the ruckus and slight water flow. There is obviously someone struggling due to the water flow, although when Daniel interacts with the container, he just notes that the system is slowly starting to do its work, oblivious to what is currently going on. This is probably a reference to former Daniel being ignorant to the fact that people were being tortured at the castle, and even when he became aware of it, it was deemed justifiable as Daniel believed they were practically death row inmates. Fish has made its way inside and can be seen swimming around. This is fresh spring water after all. There are sounds of large bubbles bursting at the surface. This may be a hallucination, as the sounds are a bit similar to the ones made by the water-dwelling Karn, which was encountered earlier. There is a bridge stuck in a hoisted position, seemingly rarely used. It may be released from its weird rusty dock by hurling a rock at the weak chains holding it in place. The second of the 3 valves has been found, and next to it, a continuation of Daniel's journal.
8th of August, 1839. I could never be certain until today that I was on the right path. Using my orb, Alexander managed to channel its power unto us. The inner sanctum flared with blue, fiery light, and I could feel the same things I felt in the dark chamber in Algeria. It was like standing in a mad whirlpool of impressions. It was terrifying, but Alexander kept calm and wielded strange tools of science in order to tame the storm.
Daniel now can compare what he's going through to what happened back in the ancient underground tomb in Algeria. It felt like the exact same thing, so in his mind, everything now makes much more sense. The orb is to blame for all recent events, and Alexander seems able to tame its properties, at least somewhat, so there's no doubt in his mind he needs to trust the Baron. The Guardian becomes furious, however, and a very rare feature of this occult entity is about to emerge.
Suddenly, the blue light was stained by strains of red, and the walls burst with pulsating tissue resonating with the scene. Alexander quickly covered the orb in some cloth, and the unspeakable thing vanished. Apparently, the orb's shadow is closer than Alexander thought. He said I should prepare for a warding ritual tomorrow. I'm not sure what he expects, but I have a bad feeling about this.
For the first time in Daniel's journal, red tissue and aura is being documented. The Guardian is close, and it is very upset. This leads me to believe that until now, Daniel might not have been in grave danger. If we compare this to Agrippa's experience during his own orb theft, which was revealed in a note earlier in time, they both are curious about the orbs, but do not wish to use its powers, only for study. People on the path between Agrippa and the Guardian were killed, like with Daniel's recent past, but once caught up to, Agrippa was simply forced to give back the relic while being transported far away. The same might have eventually been the case with Daniel, although the Guardian did not seem to have any haste in taking the orb back. It seemed to study Daniel carefully, while even seemingly attempting communication in his dreams. What could its intentions have been? Was it playfully tagging along, invisibly and discreet? That is all off the table now, though. If Daniel did stand a chance to survive a direct confrontation with the monstrous entity, then that might no longer be the case. The orb was misused by Daniel at this point, and that cannot go unpunished. Daniel is told that a warding ritual might buy them some time, and Daniel already reports having a bad feeling about that. But at the same time, after witnessing that day's events, his moral is being challenged, and one should not underestimate how an innocent human's mind can corrupt when one's own life is at great risk. Spinning the second cistern valve causes a similar reaction, with noisy pipes and a violent gust of wind. The dubious ambience spurs once again, as if expressing that Daniel has a bad feeling about this otherwise necessary action, but he cannot quite put his finger on what it is. The muffled voice of a weakened man is even more struggling as the water flow increases. Even more so now, there is clearly someone in need of urgent help. Yet upon interacting with the container, Daniel is still ignorant, shrugging it off as strange sounds. This may be a reference to former Daniel experimenting with torture and maximizing vitae potential, perhaps overdoing it so that the prisoner's life ceases prematurely. After all, he was instructed that a prisoner's pleading for help needs to be ignored to the best of efforts. The last unexplored corner of the Cistern system has pipes which intermittently exhale a burning hot steam. Maybe this is intended to decrease stress on the machinery and system, but we only need to stick around for a little bit longer. These hazards may be turned off by a valve after first passing through them, so that Daniel's return becomes less of a hassle. A familiar growl can be heard in the water. Is this all made up by Daniel's mind? More on this to be revealed in not too long. The final redirection valve and the final journal entry in the cistern await ahead. Daniel's text shows him trying to think rationally about this all, and something seems a little off.
9th of August, 1839. It is still early, and Alexander is busy preparing for the ritual later today. Seeing him this worked up makes me question why. What does he stand to gain? I realize he is curious about it all, but surely there must be more. Is he so foolish he will attempt to tame the power of the orb? I must admit that yesterday, when Alexander flooded the inner sanctum with blue light, I realized we had but graced the orb's true potential. This might turn out to be more than escaping a creeping shadow. It might be the beginning of something truly extraordinary.
One interesting thing to note is that the Baron's intentions are briefly questioned. Why get into so much danger just to study the orbs? Or does he truly attempt to contest the Guardian for the powerful treasure? The hidden truth is that Alexander is not from this world, and only something as powerful as the orbs may allow him to return back. Along the line of thought of power, Daniel might now start to become somewhat corrupt. While unwilling to have anything to do with the orb's powers at first, he now fantasizes about benefits from using them. Perhaps he still intended this theoretically and purely from an exhibitionary standpoint, but I do not like the direction this is going. After using the final valve, a more intense version of the ambience effect can be heard, and as the redirection flow reaches full capacity, the area goes extremely dark and airy. If you pay close attention, it sounds like a man struggling to take his last few breaths of air before being fully submerged in water. The ambient soundtrack that plays has degraded to a bottom low. Something seems to be splashing nearby, but this is just seemingly Daniel hallucinating. Sometimes in the cistern, he may experience panic while hallucinating that a current is charging head-on, although instead of being wounded, the water goes completely still as if nothing happened. Interacting with the container at this point, Daniel will admit to there having been a voice, which now has ceased. The way he simply records "the voice went silent" sounds like something that would have gone through his mind after prolonged torture of a prisoner, unintentionally granting a final act of mercy. Daniel has done his deeds in the cistern and may retire peacefully to the cistern entrance. This may not always be as easy, however, and the alternative outcome is a lot more stressy. Sometimes, upon completing the sewer water redirection, seemingly when low on sanity upon doing so, Daniel will experience something very similar to the event in the archive tunnels. And beware, for this is not a hallucination. The Guardian roars loud and fiercely. A hellish red glow illuminates through the darkness, and simultaneously a water-dwelling current appears behind you. In the exact same manner as before, Yes, even the same fast-paced soundtrack makes its return. The only difference is that this seems to be a regular-sized creature, and not a big version as was brought into the archive tunnels. The ambiance has once again changed, one which seems to be accompanied by the current and guardian both. The latter keeps roaring angrily and often. Red tissue has blocked the way back. Once again, is this something done on purpose, or is this just a side effect of the Guardian's presence, much like the troublesome Cavens? Thankfully, there is a way. When one door closes, another door opens, in this case anyway. On the other side, fleshy residue has closed a gap, forming an elastic bridge, allowing passage back to the cistern entrance. The cistern ended up being a bit creepier than initially thought, so hopefully there will be no need to go back in there, although it doesn't seem like we have to anyway. The stairs are no longer flooded, but natural poison from beneath has filled the air. That is quite unfortunate. What about this other area at the opposite end over there? It might contain vital clues for what to do next. In order to access it, the bridge's machinery needs some work. The time has come to inspect the cistern machinery. What could possibly go wrong? This episode is now coming to a close, so take in the relatively soothing atmosphere while you still can, and do have a pleasant night.